This is what I wrote. This was 2011. I'm glad I'm a girl in the same way that I have no regrets. If I were born a man, I would know that I was lucky. But the fact is, I'm a woman and there's no sense complaining. No grudges, no regrets. What's the point? I can't say I wish I were a boy. It's a waste. Obviously, in that moment, not really understanding that like being trans was a possibility. I was a late bloomer and I desperately wanted to go through puberty. There were like all these things. I thought like womanhood was on the other side, femininity was on the other side. And if I could just become an adult, or even like do the things like shave my legs, shave my armpits, wear deodorant, get my period, then I would finally be like, oh, now I feel like a girl or a woman. And then it just like never came.
Are you open to like sharing about your, I guess, your journey and experience with your gender identity and like how you've come to your, and whatever your current understanding is as a non-binary
Yeah.
person?
Yeah, it's funny. I also read in my journal today this thing that really shocked me
Mm.
about this. So I'm gonna just read it to you. I took a photo of it because I was like, oh my God, that's wild. So this is what I wrote. This was 2011. I'm glad I'm a girl in the same way that I have no regrets. If I were born a man, I would know that I was lucky. But the fact is, I'm a woman and there's no sense complaining. No grudges, no regrets. What's the point? I can't say I wish I were a boy. It's a waste. Obviously, in that moment, not really understanding that like being trans was a possibility. Um, so I guess in high school I used to like describe myself and um, my sexuality as like a gay boy.
Hmm.
Um, and I grew up really thinking that it was like just obviously better to be a boy, that like everyone knew that. Um, which obviously everyone does not know that. Like primarily trans women. So so I thought that that was a given.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I kind of was like, but I'm a girl, so like I'm just gonna make the best of this. Um, I guess later, like I wrote a play about a breakup, um, where like the breakup happens in real time, and the actors, like five actors, played these two characters. They like
Hmm.
swap in and out. So like the gender was changing, the race was changing, like the
Hmm.
identities were changing. Um, so I look back on things like that and I'm like, okay, this was something that I was always kind of like exploring and playing with and interested in. um but I guess, yeah, like I was always pretty open about like my experience of my gender, and it just sort of, I just started describing it differently as I learned new language. I remember reading Eileen Miles' book, Chelsea Girls, and saying, like, giving it to my mom and saying, like, the way that Eileen talks about their gender is like the closest that I've ever heard anyone talk about gender to how I feel about my gender. They talk about like um, getting like quote unquote mistaken as a for a boy, and like how affirming that is,
Hmm.
and getting called sir and stuff. And
Hmm.
um yeah, I mean, and then I guess like it was like for a while I thought I couldn't really call myself non-binary because I like benefited so much from like being perceived as a cis woman. Um, and then a bunch of people in my life who are trans and non-binary were like, "That's stupid." Like you could use that word if it feels right to you. And then I started using she and they pronouns at one point, and then
Hmm.
there was this like really clear switch where all of a sudden like people would say she about me, and I would like be like, "Who are we talking about?"
Hmm.
Um, and that was when I waited a little while to see if that was consistent before being like, all right, no, like these are my pronouns, this is how I identify. And like, letting it really, I mean, I feel like I've always kind of dressed really androgynous.
Hmm.
But I really did let myself lean into like um, or push against what I had always sort of thought was the only option for me that came from my mom, sort of like my mom's version of like raising her kids in a feminist way was like, you just want to be like the most attractive version of yourself so that you have the most men to choose from. Like that was empowerment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so she would like, she got me like laser hair removal on my upper lip when I was in high school. And like, um, you know, and she thought she was helping. Like she really thought she was doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, yeah, I really kind of let myself just let go of a lot of those things that I thought were like required for me.
When you were talking about you would hear the word she, and all of a sudden you'd be like who are you talking about, or who are they talking about? Is
Hmm.
that what people refer to as like gender dysphoria?
I would think for some people, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, yeah, I guess that's probably a kind of, or like one experience of gender dysphoria.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. And I guess for you that kind of experience, did you, and it was gender something you wrestled a lot with or thought about a lot with throughout the course of your life, or like how did you, I guess even start to have those questions? Because I think for myself, like as a cis white dude, it's not something that I had a lot of like, you know, that hasn't been a big question in my life
Hmm.
through a lot of pieces. It has now as I've entered more career spaces and entered other
Hmm.
people and started to question, be curious about these different things. But I'm curious for yourself. I think we're about the same age as well. Like, how did this stuff get introduced to you, and how did you start asking? Why did you start asking?
Um, well, you know, as I said, like I just thought that it was obviously better to be a boy. And I think
Hmm.
eventually like realizing that other people weren't having that experience
Hmm.
was eye-opening. Um, I think there's like I don't know, as a kid it wasn't like you know, it's not so obvious how different like binary like boys and girls are because you
Hmm.
haven't gone through puberty. And then I think the way that I now like now I can understand part of what was going on, but like I was a late bloomer and I desperately wanted to go through puberty. There were like
Hmm.
all these things. I thought like womanhood was on the other side, femininity was on the other side. And if I could just become an adult or even like do the things, right? Like shave my legs, shave my armpits, like wear deodorant, get my period, then I would finally be like, oh, now I feel like a girl or a
Hmm.
woman. Um, and then it just like never came. Like all those
Hmm.
things happened and I felt the same
Hmm.
and they didn't bother me. Like I still like wearing makeup sometimes and um I don't get dysphoria from my period. I'm, you know, I used to be like pretty obsessed with periods. Um like I had a blog about periods.
A blog
Um
post or a whole blog about them?
no, I had a whole Tumblr called Bloody Shorts that was short stories of people's first period.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
I'm sure it's still there. There's still stickers around Bushwick, which is wild because it's like I haven't added to it in like 10 years. But anyway, um, yeah, was I wrestling with it? I mean, I think there is like a privileged place that um, in gender experimentation that like AFAB people, you know, people assigned female at birth, people who are raised as girls, um, get because masculinity is prioritized, is you know seen as better. So when we act like tomboys, you know, that's not looked down upon. Whereas
Yeah.
like for people who are seen as boys to be more feminine or to wear dresses or to like dolls or whatever, like they get the shit kicked out of them
Hmm.
figuratively and literally. So there's a certain way that like, you know, and the sort of shadow side of that is that like when I express my gender differently, it doesn't get read any differently by people. So there's this like invisibilizing aspect to it. You know, I can wear um like a suit and tie and people are like, "Oh, that's a woman in menswear."
Mm.
You know, so it just like doesn't always register with other
Yeah.
people, even though it feels different to me. Anyway, did I always wrestle with it? I mean, I think it's an interesting, it's a little bit of like a chicken and egg thing around language
Mm.
where it's like
Sure.
I was having these feelings obviously and like have this sort of predisposition and I don't really express femininity and womanhood in most of the stereotypical ways, but um it was only something that I began to really consciously explore because the language came into the vernacular, you know,
Mm. Yeah. No.
pronouns, gender binary, like non binary, trans, you know, all these terms. And then it starts to go like, oh, how do these feel to me?
Hmm. Once you found the words that fit you and the expression that fit you and how you wanted, like how you felt on the outside or express yourself on the outside, it resonated with how you felt on the inside. How did that start to change your life, if at all?
um, well, it changed my life a lot in positive ways and negative ways. I think, you know, I was talking earlier about like connection, and I obviously like really value relationships. And I definitely went through a period of being like very rigid about, you know, who could be in my life and the language they had to use. Um, and that, you know, that was really hard. I think I had higher hopes than what a lot of people were living up to in my life. You know, I think it's reasonable to expect like your immediate family to like do the work and like people who close to you who want to stay close to you, but it's less reasonable to expect like the, you know, the office assistant at your doctor's office to
Hmm.
like, and also like what a waste of time and energy. Um, but I think I think I started to feel more well, I certainly think I felt a like more grounded sense of self. I think having a clear sense of like this is who I am and this is how I understand myself because I understand myself. Um because I know myself. Like that certainly changes a life, I think.